And we are back once again. Hello, everyone. Mr. Bishop, my dear mother, my dear father, and of course, our resident Lord of Chaos has finally returned, the prodigy son. Sean, welcome back from your trip to Greece. Let's see here. It would appear we're all systems go. Yeah, where is Tara? What the heck? Everybody else is here. Tara, what the hell? Anyway, as we said in the description today, we're going to kind of do the yin to the yang of last week. Last week we talked about American folk heroes and so on, because we totally didn't overshoot the 4th of July or anything like that. By the way, to our American viewers, I hope you had a happy Independence Day. To everyone who's not American, sorry. Better luck in the next life. I'm kidding, of course. Everyone's welcome here. Glad to see everybody here. But, yeah, we're going to talk about some famous Native Americans. Because, I mean, they're as much Americans as anybody else, to be fair. There was actually a legal precedent for that, in fact, actually. But we're going to jump into this. Hopefully everything is good. It looks... We did not freeze or anything, right? Everything's good?
Yeah, everything's good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Cool. So, once again, I have... the notes have been so sprawled out and big that I have to use the full screen. So I can't see what you guys are up to in the corners. And that just makes me so worried because Sean's back. You know, we're going to have to get him on the show and have him talk about whatever the hell he's been up to for the past... How many weeks now? 2, 3? I'd say it's been nice, but at the same time, I kind of missed him, you know? Oh, really? You're going to be... Cool, so I can't wait till a couple weeks when you come back and be like, actually, you got that wrong. It's like, yeah, I can't wait for that. The first one we're going to talk about, probably one of the most well-known Native Americans. And again, just like last week, I'm talking about real people because, boy, I could be here all day talking about like their legends and their spirits and things like that. But like I said, like last week, we're talking about real people that we know for a fact lived and did stuff. We're doing that this week too. Red Cloud. Yeah, we'll be mentioning Red Cloud a little bit. But the first one we're going to be talking about is Crazy Horse. One of my favorites. The funny thing is actually he was my favorite. I have to confess, while I was doing research for this, I think I have come to have a new favorite. Boy, howdy, you want to talk about a Renaissance man who was everywhere and did everything. Boy, howdy, Crazy Horse was interesting. I don't think I've ever made so many notes on one topic for this show before, actually. I was kind of worried that I wouldn't be able to do him. Now, what's interesting is that there's a lot of contradictory stories. Everybody and their ugly sister has a story about Crazy Horse. Partially because of the fact that he's not the original Crazy Horse. The one we all know, who hopefully is in the history books. He was actually named after his father. The Crazy Horse that we all know was born sometime in the 1840s. They don't actually know when he was born. Partially because of the fact that the Lakota people, and I really, really hope I'm saying that right because I've been pronouncing it that way, for the past week or so, and I hope it's right. Quick disclaimer. The various languages of the native peoples of North America doesn't really translate all that well into English. There's a reason that we use the translated names for a lot of these people. It's because I'm not fully sure you can pronounce these names in English. The bishop actually even warned me, don't try to pronounce a word that you don't know. That's kind of been the story of this research. Is like, hey, how do you pronounce this? Oh, it's pronounced like that. Then why isn't it spelled that way? Because it wasn't spelled in the idea of being in English, to be fair. Some of the native people even have their own, what's the term I'm looking at? Alphabet. They have their own characters and symbols and stuff like that. But anyway, so there's a lot of confusion about him. Again, partly because he was named after his father. Also, apparently, he didn't have a name until later in his life. He actually went by several nicknames. From what I can understand, basically, with the Lakota people, you're kind of either given a name or you choose a name when you reach adulthood. But for some reason, he didn't. And it wasn't until his father had died that he decided to take up his father's name. So there's a lot of confusion. It doesn't help that his father, I guess Crazy Horse Elder, some people refer to him as, had a humongous family. He had, let's see here, according to my notes, he had six wives over the course of his life. Most of them simultaneously. Which, the guy has my sympathies, man. I could never understand that whole multi-relationship thing. I can barely stand talking to a single person at any given time. I couldn't imagine having 6 wives. Though, to be fair, he didn't have them all at one time. Some of them he did. But anyway, like a lot of actually famous Native American people, our Crazy Horse, the younger, I guess some people call him, the younger horse, he got involved in military stuff very young in life. Supposedly, when he was a boy, he actually saw the former chief of his tribe, Conquering Bear, die. And after that, he had these visions. And they were always violent, they were always of battle, they were always of warfare. Which sounds pretty horrible to me. I mean, that sounds kind of like PTSD, personally. But he claimed that they were visions, and he basically used them kind of to make decisions and guide his life and stuff. It also doesn't help that he was apparently a very conflicted person. Supposedly, in private, he was very charismatic and he was very unserious, very funny, charming man. But publicly, especially when he was around a lot of people, he'd become very quiet, very distant. He wasn't a very chatty person in public. And of course, there's also the stereotype that he was an alcoholic, which I'm actually going to address a little bit later. But anyway, from my research, he had a baptism by fire at a very young age, probably his teens. His people, the Lakota, had constant conflicts with, and I made a list here because, boy howdy, this is all before U.S. interference, by the way. I'm talking about just within their own civilizations. The Lakota people, when Crazy Horse was alive, went to war with the Crow, which was another... I wouldn't say they were an actual nation. They were more of a tribe, sincerely. They were nomads. They lived pretty much by pillaging and rioting and stuff like that. It's funny, they're even other native tribes and societies and stuff like that, they don't even call the Crow a nation. They call the Crow a tribe. Then there's also the Shoshone. The Shoshone, they also went to war with Shoshone. I'm dyslexic and I'm white. Give me a break. Okay, I can already see people in the chats. I don't need hyphonic explanation here, okay? I'm trying my best. They went to war with Blackfoot, which actually I'm descended from. I think I have 2 relatives. My mother and father will easily correct me, by the way, in the chat, but I believe I have 2 relatives that were Blackfoot. And again, that's just the big names. The Lakota people were a very proud military people. They got into fights with everybody, and then we came along. Now, he, like I said, he always kind of lived in battle. Now, his big claim to fame was in 1864 at the Battle of, I believe it's Pallet Bridge and Red Buttes. And yes, I am trying really hard to say it not how it looks, because that is not how it is not spelled like it sounds. But those battles were very significant to him, because that's when he actually was given the title of what's called, and this is a rough translation. I don't think this is what they meant, but all the translations I saw said he became known as a shirt wearer, which is like a war chief. Now, the Lakota people, they didn't have much in the way of armor. They were very light infantry-based fighters. So from what I understand, usually they wouldn't even have a shirt or anything on. They would have very little clothing. Their leaders, their war chiefs, would usually have a vest or a shirt on, so you could see them no matter where you were in the battle. So you knew where your leader was. And that's why they're called shirt wearers. But usually they're generally referred to as a war chief. A very common misconception, Crazy Horse was never the actual chief of Lakota. He was kind of, in his later years, he kind of was in charge of the actual settlement in the reservation that he ended up in. But we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, everyone behaving themselves. Oh, really? The Crow were an offset from the Sioux. Or is it Sus or Sioux? Sioux. Thank you. Okay. Well, hold on. Mr. Bishop, you said something interesting. Did the Blackfoot have a reputation for that? Is that kind of like the Genghis Khan thing where everyone is descended from Genghis Khan? Or, I can't see the chat, so feel free to take your time to respond. But yeah, is that very common? Anyway, but anyway, like I said, he became a war leader. And what's interesting is he was always kind of the lead by example guy. He loved to put himself in the vanguard at the front of the line. Kind of came back to haunt him later in life. But anyway, one of his bigger claims to fame was 1866 in the Fetterman Massacre alongside Chief Little Wolf, where he literally used himself as bait to draw out American forces and ended up actually like pincer trapping them and killed like 1,000 U.S. soldiers. Really nasty battle. And that was kind of his MO. He would do that. He knew he had a reputation. He knew that both Native and U.S. forces knew his name and knew what he looked like. There are stories he had very unique war paint that he would wear. That was like a storm. He would wear a lightning bolt on one side of his face, and he'd have like white powder splashed on his other that was supposed to look like hail pellets and stuff like that. So they knew who he was, and he kind of depended on that. He was very fond of using himself as bait and drawing attention to himself. Which, I mean, hey, if it works... Personally, I wouldn't want people shooting at me. I'd be content to stand on the hill and just send my minions. But, you know, hey, I'm lawful evil. I'm allowed to. Gotta be true to the alignments. Anyway, what's funny is that actually he had a really weird incident that happened shortly after that. So, basically... Long story short, he was accused of having an affair with a man's wife. This guy, everything I found on him said his name was No Water. He was known for being a very aggressive, mean drunk, and his wife wanted to leave him. Now, in the Lakota Nation's laws, yes, a woman could divorce her husband. She could choose to leave. But it was complicated. Like, she needed to get a blessing and all this other stuff. So she went to Crazy Horse to talk to him. Because, again, he was famous. Everybody knows Crazy Horse. Everyone knows him. You know, he's a hero. You can talk to him. He'll help you. And basically, No Water saw her going into his tent lodge because he was out hunting. And No Water approached with a pistol. And he called for Crazy Horse to come out, which Crazy Horse did. And then No Water tried to shoot into the tent because he wanted to kill his wife. And the stories kind of vary here a little bit, but what I was seeing most consistently, they claim that Crazy Horse's cousin was in that tent, and he actually tried to grab the gun away from No Water, and somehow the gun ended up going off and actually grazed Crazy Horse across the cheek. I'll give everyone a moment to do a why so serious joke about that. But no, he was shot in the face. Now here's the thing that blew my mind when I was studying this. Crazy Horse was the one who got in trouble for all this mess. Apparently, a bunch of the elders were like, well, you know, Crazy Horse, it does look kind of suspicious that this woman was going to a tent that you were staying in while you were on a hunting trip. Personally, I would argue that, well, I mean, if they were there to do something inappropriate, why was Crazy Horse's cousin in the tent? I mean, I highly doubt the dude's going to have a menage a trois, but I don't know the situation. But in the long story short, Crazy Horse was actually dishonored. I know, right? You get shot in the face and they strip you of your military rank for your trouble. Keep in mind, he had nothing involved in this beforehand. He literally was out hunting with his cousins. And she went looking for him because she wanted his advice and help because she wanted to divorce her alcoholic husband. And I've always wondered, because that's the problem, because I was reading about it, I was like, okay, well, what happened to him? What happened to No Water? I found no other information about it. He shot Crazy Horse in the face accidentally, which is another reoccurring theme. Crazy Horse was very accident prone. People were accidentally hurting him all the damn time. Funny how that works, right? But anyway, he gets shot in the face. So he has his title of war chief stripped from him. Because, well, it really does look like you were having an affair, Crazy Horse. And again, that just blows my mind. And it's funny because it wasn't long after. It was probably less than a year later. They decided to eat their words. Because an individual stepped onto the political or, I guess, military stage, the theater of war. And it's funny because doing the research about it, this is someone that I'm surprised he's not more famous. Because once you reach a certain point in Crazy Horse's life, you can't talk about him without talking about this guy. And I don't think anyone's going to know who I'm talking about. This guy is actually oddly obscure. General George Crook. Now, I want to see real quick. Does anybody know who I'm talking about? And they're still talking about Plath. So, General George Crook, ironic name, by the way, and that you'll understand what I mean later. He was a soldier from the Civil War. He served in the Union, and he climbed through the ranks. Supposedly, he was very ambitious, and he, even as a regular soldier, he would kind of assert himself and take charge of his units and things like that. And the funny thing is the government was like, well, shoot, he's so good at taking charge. Give him charge! So they let him take command. And he was a tactical genius, apparently. Him and Crazy Horse fought all up and down the center regions of North America. In Nebraska, in Wyoming, all over the damn place. some people even joked that it was, they were perfect opposites. Crazy Horse was this brave, charismatic fighter who could lead the charge himself, but Crook was this tactical genius, and Crazy Horse could never crack him. Crazy Horse could never get through the traps and or successfully capture him. Crook himself would go on actually to get a lot of respect and even actually advocate for the native people. Unfortunately, that was many years after his war with Crazy Horse. And basically the Lakota people, they were like, we can't take this guy. We need Crazy Horse back. Crazy Horse is the only one who could maybe beat him. So they re-gave him the war chief title. I have to say, I'm not sure I would have come back. I get shot in the face and then accused of being an adulterer. You strip my military rank, dishonor me. Now you want me to come and save you from this oogie boogie scary general dude? I don't know, man. I don't know. I might have just, decided to move or something. But Crazy Horse did decide to come back, and he did lead a campaign. Now, what's interesting is that this war is the home of where maybe the most well-known battle between the natives and the U.S. actually happened. The battle we talked about last week, Little Bighorn. Anyone from the chat remember that? Okay, yeah, I can see it, Mr. Bishop. He loved his country, he loved his home. I can respect that. I'm just saying, I don't know, man. They did him real wrong. And this wasn't no big deal. This was they wanted him to come back specifically to save them from someone who was generally terrifying to them. I'm just saying, maybe Crazy Horse was a bigger man than me. He probably was. I don't know. I don't know if I could come back. Hell, I might just decide to go talk to this general guy myself. But anyway, now, like I said, the Battle of Little Bighorn. Now, right before Bighorn happened, Crazy Horse led a raid to attack Crook's camp, his fortification. This became known as the Battle of the Rosebud. It was very strange. There were very few casualties on both sides, but that wasn't really what Crazy Horse was after. What he was after was attacking supplies and equipment. Basically, he was banking that if he could disrupt and disable the camp enough, that would make Crook stay where he was. Because basically everybody knew there was going to be a big confrontation at Little Bighorn. Sitting Bull, in fact, another very famous Native American chief, who actually was a chief, he even said that he had seen a vision about the Battle of Little Bighorn. But anyway, and Crazy Horse got what he wanted. He was able to damage Crook's supplies in his camp to the point where Crook was like, "Stop! Hold up! He sent a letter to Custer telling him, "Look, I got raided. I do not have the ability to mobilize and move right now. I'm going to need like 3 days to prepare. So stay away from Little Bighorn. Don't go there. These Lakota and sus people are going there. We cannot attack them individually. We need both our armies to flank them. So stay where you are." And let's just get this out of the way. Custer was a very impressive general. Well, actually, he wasn't a general. He was a lieutenant colonel, I believe was his official rank when he died. Feel free to correct me. I think it was lieutenant colonel. But anyway, what's funny is he was kind of the opposite of Crook. He was from West Point. He was also the bottom of his grade. He was the lowest graded graduate from West Point, which is kind of hilarious. Now, to be fair, we could poke fun at him for being supposedly he was a pompous ass. Nobody liked him. He was very rude. He was very arrogant. He'll never let you forget that he was from West Point. And supposedly he didn't like Crook either, because Crook was the opposite. Crook was a nobody. Crook was a no account. He never went to college. He was just a soldier that they let be in charge. And so Custer thought that Crook was trying to hold him back. And so Custer was like, I'm not going to let this guy steal my glory. I'm going to go to Little Bighorn. Now, to be fair, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here, because a lot of people, they always like to say, well, how could Custer have thought he could win that battle? How dumb do you have to be to walk into an obvious ambush? Uh-oh, we have something going on? Really, really, you knew a descendant of General Crook? Dad? Three armies. Okay, yeah. Yeah. They're kind of backing me up here. Crook was more known for... Yeah, his fight with the Apache and things like that. Yeah. Well, look, everything I was saying said that basically Crook told Custer, wait for me. I've been delayed. The stories I was reading said he was calling for like 3 days, but maybe it was 1 day, Mr. Bishop. I'm not sure. But he knew that there were native factions gathering together at Little Bighorn. Everybody knew that that was where they were going to make a big battle. Now, again, as I was saying, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, because everyone makes fun of Custer. Let's set the record straight here. Number one, he himself was no slouch. He was a military commander. He had many victories under his belt. He was a seasoned cavalry leader and fighter himself. Okay, he made one big mistake. That's it. And you know me, I'm all about giving the devil their due. Okay, he was not a nobody. He was very dangerous. He was very capable. And on top of this, from his perspective, he figured, okay, well, if Crook is over here and he's tangled up, that means there must be a native army fighting him there. Well, if they're there with Crook, they're not there at Little Bighorn, now are they? And this is why he gave his famous transmission saying, only a few Redskins, I'll be finished by midday. Which he was. Just not in the way he anticipated. Unfortunately, what he didn't realize is that Crazy Horse and his army weren't hanging around playing with Crook. They struck at Rosebud and got the hell out of there. And went immediately to Bighorn, because again, Crazy Horse's whole plan was hanging on the crutch that Crook wouldn't be able to move. That was his whole plan. That was his whole MO. Which should also say something about how much he concerned himself with Custer versus Crook. Custer, I can take that guy. Crook, no, we need to stop him. Priorities. Jamie Crook. Huh, neat. I didn't know that. But anyway, so Little Bighorn was a horrible, horrible failure for the U.S. forces, especially for Custer, which, yes, he died. There's even some accounts I've heard that it was actually Crazy Horse himself who actually killed Custer. I'm saying that's one story. I don't think that's true.
His name's George Crook. You were
No, yeah, no, I'm saying I think Chet was talking about the descendant that he knew.
Oh.
Yeah, George Crook. Yeah. Um, yeah, no. Yeah, he underestimated him. He underestimated. Yeah, but again, and I'm trying to be fair here because that's what we're all about, right? We're about fairness. From his perspective, there were way less native forces there than he thought because he thought they were fighting Crook. Fun side note: calling back to last week, we mentioned Calamity Jane. General Crook actually had her in his army. He had actually sent her on a detachment mission to basically create a choke point at Pallet River. And I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But yeah, we came this close to having a confrontation between Custer, Crazy Horse, Crook, and Calamity Jane all at the same battle. You can't write this stuff better. How cool would that have been? Well, I mean, as cool as, obviously, war's not cool. It's bloody. It's tragic. It's fine. Fine. But seriously, the writing is there. We were this close to it happening. But Crook had her basically, his idea was that if the natives tried to flee from Little Bighorn, they would head to this Pallet River. So he put Calamity and a bunch of other sharpshooters to basically create a sniper choke point. But how cool would that have been? There's also another big misconception with the Battle of Little Bighorn. Sitting Bull was not there himself. He wasn't really a warrior himself. He was more of a chief leader. He was the one who told everyone, hey, we need to fight here. He himself wasn't there. There's a lot of romanticization that he was. Everything I read said that he actually was not physically present at the battle. But anyway, back to my original point. The ghost story is that Crazy Horse himself actually killed Custer. I couldn't find any proof of this. I only heard it was just a story. But to be fair, Custer and Crazy Horse were both more of the lead from the front, kind of guys. So I would argue it's plausible, but history doesn't usually go down like that, actually. That's the funny thing. A lot of people talk about these people who went to war and battle, and we always remember it, like something out of Star Wars, where the heroes fight each other personally and stuff. And actually, it's kind of funny. Usually, generals and officers don't fight personally. For example, Crook and Crazy Horse, they never met until Crazy Horse surrendered. Spoiler warning, by the way, Crazy Horse surrendered, because we're not there at that part of the story yet, per se. Anyway. Oh, hi, Connie. We'll get to Red Cloud in a minute, Chet. But anyway, so even after Little Bighorn, Crook and Crazy Horse had many skirmishes, many battles up and down the countryside. There were people who would joke that they'd be fighting forever. That it was the irresistible force and the immovable object, and just neither one could really win. The last time they would have any kind of a battle would be at Wolf Mountain, which was yet another stalemate. But then this really bad winter set in, and there was a plague that spread through Lakota. Now, the stories kind of vary a little bit here, but the basic gist of it is that Crazy Horse came to the decision he couldn't keep fighting Crook. There was plague, it was cold, he was up against the wall. Versus Crook, who had big fortifications with lovely fires and medicine. That's an important part of this. Remember that. Medicine. And so, some stories claim that Crazy Horse had a vision. That he was out in a blizzard and a wolf let him into its den to take shelter. Now, supposedly, Actually, it's not supposed to. It's true. General Crook would go on to get a Native American name. They would call him Grey Wolf, or he would prefer the Latin terminology, Nantan Lupin, which is the Grey Wolf. The problem with this story, because obviously Crazy Horse had a vision about a wolf, and so he thought, oh, I need to talk to Crook. Crook can help me. Crook will help me. That's why the wolf in my vision helped me. The one problem with this story is that General Crook didn't get the nickname, the Grey Wolf, until much after Crazy Horse. He got that title for his war with the Apache, which was after this. So I don't know if I believe that story. It's a cool story they tell about Crazy Horse and Crook. But another story they tell is that Crazy Horse got his people together and they made the march to, I believe it was Fort Robinson. Hold on, let me see if I actually wrote it. Did I remember to write it down? I did not. I forgot to write. I'm terrible at making notes, by the way. I believe it was Fort Robinson. But as the story goes, the guards that were on the post, they saw Crazy Horse and this huge mass of people, a couple hundred, I want to say, at night coming towards the fort. So they gave the warnings like, hey, a mass of people under Lakota flags are coming our way. Now, supposedly, Crook actually went to the chapel of Fort Robinson. Because from his perspective, everything he was seeing, he thought that Crazy Horse was coming to make a last stand, to die on his enemy's spear kind of thing. And Crook was like, please no. Please don't do this, Crazy Horse. Please don't do this. Not like this. Supposedly he was he respected Crazy Horse a lot. He respected the native people. And he didn't want this conflict to end with basically Crazy Horse committing an elaborate form of suicide. Crook knew Crazy Horse had no chance of fighting here. And so he literally got to the chapel and he prayed to God. He was like, please let them be here to wish us a Merry Christmas. Let it be anything else. Please don't make me have to kill this man. And then immediately a guard came in and was like, sir, Crazy Horse would like to negotiate surrender. Now, supposedly, Crook was very stern about this. He was very serious, and he actually did ride out and met Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse told him straight up, my people are sick. The winter is crushing us. Supposedly you're an honorable man. I want to surrender in return for medicine. And supposedly, Crook was like, well, all right, fine. I accept your surrender. And you remember the meme? There used to be a meme, what was said, what was meant. I can only imagine it was like, Crook was like, okay, fine, I accept your surrender. What he meant was, thank you, 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 thank you. Because he did accept Crazy Horse's surrender, and he honored the request for medicine. After that, Crazy Horse and the Lakota people were moved over to the Red Cloud Agency reservation, and they were given a little settlement. That is when Crazy Horse was kind of the leader. He was in charge. But the problem was that the Red Cloud Agency was overseen by, Chief Red Cloud, who had been... He was an interesting figure. He was kind of controversial, from what I was reading. He was one of the earlier chiefs who actually surrendered to the U.S., claiming it was to save his people. But supposedly he always kind of disliked Crazy Horse, actually. He didn't like them being at war. Funny enough, he also didn't like Sitting Bull, from what I read. But anyway, the big fly in the ointment here wasn't Red Cloud. It was another chief named Spotted Tail. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are nasty, ugly stories about Crazy Horse being a drunk. I want to point out, I couldn't find any credible source. Everything that I read about him being an alcoholic was slanderous. So I'm not inclined to believe it, because supposedly Spotted Tail, especially Spotted Tail, he spread rumors about how, well, Crazy Horse the other day, he was drunk and he was talking about how he wanted to die killing white people, and he wanted to kill a white general before he died, and he would never rest as long as there were white people alive. Now, supposedly the conspiracy theory claims that this was all a plot, because you had Crazy Horse, who was seen as kind of the de facto leader of the Lakota people, and you had General Crook, who was kind of seen as the U.S. Army, the cavalry, so to speak. And Spotted Tail wanted to drive a wedge between them because they respected each other. Maybe they could have even been friends, kind of. I'm not sure about that. But it seems like, again, if you go off the story, Spotted Tail was afraid of these two men being on the same page. And so, coincidentally, at the reservation where Spotted Tail was in charge, all these stories about Crazy Horse suddenly getting drunk and, talking about how he wants to kill them white folk. And again, specifically a general. That's convenient, huh? That's a convenient rumor, So, General Crook, he's like, oh, that's not okay. Hold on a minute. You know what? We're going to get to the bottom of this. He ordered Crazy Horse to be arrested. Now, I want to stress, Crook said many times, it was only for the purposes of talking to Crazy Horse. He wasn't going to put him in prison or something. He wanted to get to the bottom of all these rumors about Crazy Horse rabble-rousing and talking about killing white people and killing generals. Because, he was a white general. And generally speaking, you don't want the guy who surrendered to you talking about killing you. So I personally completely understand Crook wanting him to be brought in. Unfortunately, Crazy Horse was suspicious and was like, wait, this doesn't sound right. Wait, Crook wants to arrest me? Why the hell does Crook want me arrested? So he fled. He pulled an Alfred Parker. He ran away when he didn't do anything. Not a good strategy. Legal advice from the Vagrancy Horror, by the way. If you didn't do anything wrong, don't run from the police! Can't believe I have to explain that. Well, I guess I get it. You get scared, Again, Crazy Horse thought it was an assassination plot. But apparently, after hiding out in the wilderness for like 3 days, I think it was. Let me see here if I wrote that down. I did not write that down, once again. Anyway, but no, he went out he lived in the wilderness for a couple of days. I think it was 3. But he finally was like, no, Crook's an honorable man. He helped us. He helped me when my people needed it. Yes, we were enemies. Yes, we fought a war against each other. But that was in the past. That was when we were enemies. We're not enemies anymore. I should face him like a man and talk to him. So he returned to the Red Cloud Reservation, where he met 2 guards. Now, the story, if you thought things were muddy and confusing with Crazy Horse, hold on to your tinfoil hats, because it is about to get weird. He approached 2 guards at the reservation saying, okay, I want to go talk to General Crook. Here's the problem. Spontaneously, there was a struggle, and Crazy Horse ended up getting stabbed with a bayonet blade. Now, to be fair, I've since heard some explanations that some rifles from the time, you couldn't take the bayonet blade off. It was part of the rifle. But still, doesn't that sound like a strange thing to happen? Well, hold on, because it's going to get weirder. He was stabbed with a bayonet blade. He refused, according to the stories, he refused medical aid because he didn't want to owe his life to white medicine. Doesn't that sound weird, children? Remember why he surrendered in the first place to Crook? He didn't mind white medicine then. but suddenly he does now? Well, I'll shed some light on this confusing story. Supposedly, those weren't Crook's guards. They were assassins working for Spotted Tail. And they stabbed him and then made sure that he died, spreading a story that he was too proud to take medical aid from white men. After they stabbed him, because he struggled when he went to them in the first damn place to go talk to their boss, General Crook. I'm sorry. I try really hard to not go all conspiracy theory and, I try not to talk about stuff like that and go too off the wall, but I'm going to say it right now. Let's invent a time machine, go back to a point in history where that makes bloody sense. None of this makes any goddamn sense. He went to surrender, and then he struggled against the guards, and they stabbed him with a specific type of knife that would be on a rifle. And then refused medicine, even though he had previously accepted medicine. I don't believe it. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. I know that's the official history books say that he went to the guards, they wanted to arrest him officially, he struggled, they ended up stabbing him. I don't care. That doesn't add up. None of it makes any sense. Okay? That's just how I feel about this. Supposedly when Crook found out about it, he was very upset too. I believe the quote is that it's a damn shame he chose to die that way. Because again, from his perspective, didn't make any sense either. Though there is a creepy little ghost story. Supposedly, shortly after this happened, Spotted Tail had a knife that he kept in a glass case like a trophy. And supposedly he wouldn't talk about this knife. He wouldn't, hey, Chief Spotted Tail, why do you have a knife in a case? I just like that knife. I don't want to talk about it. Well, the ghost story goes that that's the knife that actually stabbed Crazy Horse. And Spotted Tail was so spiteful, so bitter towards Crazy Horse that he actually kept it as a trophy. Because it was his assassin that killed him. Now, that's a conspiracy theory. That's some voices on the internet. Historically speaking, he died from a bayonet blade while struggling with guards who wanted to arrest him. I've already said how stupid that sounds. I'm sorry, it does. What do you guys say? What's going on in the chat? Everyone's saying hi. Yeah, 16 inches long. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I never understood bayonet blades. I get that you can't shoot someone with a rifle at such close range. But most bayonet blades are so long and big, it's like, well, those wouldn't be good in close range either. I don't know. I never got them. I've heard stories that they were triangle shaped because it was much harder to stitch the wound shut when you got stabbed with one. I've heard that too. But I don't like bayonet blades. I'm sorry. They don't seem they seem too long for what they want to do, and yeah. You actually have one. Like one of the old ones that they had back in the 17 or 1800s, Mr. Bishop? He's saying he's got it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Wow. Neat. Where did it come from? How'd you get it? See, now I'm kind of curious.
I am too. I don't know where.
I mean, that doesn't sound like something you just find at a thrift store, Mr. Bishop. I'm sorry. And now everyone's being quiet. You know what's funny? Because my notes are so big that they cover up the whole screen. I was like, oh god, it's gonna be chaos. Sean's back. I'm not gonna be able to see the chat, and y'all are actually being quiet and behaving yourselves. It's kind of weird. Okay, random object moving. Yeah, we used to. I remember Tara. Oh, by the way, hi Tara. Welcome to the party. Um, yeah, but Grandpa's bayonet blade was different. He didn't have one of those weird triangle blades. You can get them now online. Well, yeah. I mean, is that what you did? You just got it off eBay? Did you really just get a genuine antique bayonet blade off of eBay or something, Mr. Bishop? I'm sorry. When you mentioned you have a 16-inch antique bayonet blade, that just sounds like there's a story there. Also, on a side note, I know you're there, Sean. I know you're there, and I know you're planning something. I just want you to know we have precautions set in place for you this time. No, you did not get it off eBay. Okay. Well, where did you get it, sir? I'm curious now, because I mean that kind of has to do with what we're talking about tonight. It's from the time. Is it from the time frame? Is it an 1800s bayonet blade? Well, while we get to the bottom of that with Mr. Bishop, I almost called him Mr. Chet. Just need to know where to look. You know what? I shouldn't be surprised considering he also has a tunnel rats patch. We're still working on getting you a dog of your own, by the way, Mr. Bishop. We're working on it. But anyway, before we get into the other big guy, the other big one that I have prepared, my personal favorite Native American leader. So I was requested to talk about someone from Colorado, talk about some Colorado natives. And it's kind of interesting because, to be fair, the state that we have as Colorado was nothing like the natives map were drawn up. In fact, there were like 5 different nations that had part of Colorado. But there was a famous one. A famous Apache, actually. And I'm going to say his name, and everyone's going to recognize it, even though you might not know who it is. Geronimo. For the longest time, I didn't realize Geronimo was a name. Hold on, my computer is being weird. It's a Civil War bayonet blade, Mr. Bishop? Civil War? It's a Civil War bayonet blade? Wow. Yeah, about the same time. Late 1800s, that was the American Civil War, wasn't it? We need to talk about the American Civil War at some point, too. There's all kinds of weird stuff that happened there. But anyway, we're getting off topic. So, Geronimo. Geronimo was he was kind of an Apache leader. So here's the weird thing that I found while studying this. Apache, from what I read, wasn't just one people. It was actually an alliance of 3 different factions. So there were different kinds of Apache, because the word Apache itself apparently means like warrior or soldier. I'm sure someone in the chat can give me a more specific term, but basically what we know as the Apache Nation was actually an alliance of other ones, of smaller factions. And Geronimo was a war leader, a war chief. Now, he was described as being kind of a wild man. He was an outdoorsman. He didn't like buildings and towns and cities and stuff. He believed that the native people should be nomadic and you know, put up a tent, live there, pick it up, move. He didn't like being in any place at one time. But his name became famous because of the Apache-Mexican War, which is criminally untalked about, by the way. We don't talk about that, and we should, in my personal opinion. Um, but anyway, supposedly, once again, I did not write the name down. Basically, there was a conflict between Mexico and these Apache people that resulted in the death of Geronimo's wife and children. After that, he became a changed man. And he lived but for one reason and one reason only. And he said it himself. He lived to spill Mexican blood because they took his family. Some of the stories were saying it was an accident. Others say that it was a raid and it was intentional. I'm not sure about those. But the reason that shouting Geronimo before you like jump or you do something that you know is probably a bad idea is because he hated the Mexican people so much. He so fervently wanted to fight them and avenge his family that with a knife in each hand, 2 knives, he would just charge into any Mexican formation. Usually he would be screaming, "My name is Geronimo. You will remember it." And so from the Mexicans' perspective, they hear a bunch of babble, "Geronimo!" And then there's a dude with 2 knives going Ginsu on them. By the way, he was a terrifying fighter on top of that. A lot of people called him a wild man, a berserker. He would ignore injuries. He didn't give a damn. Supposedly he was even shot once. And that wasn't enough to stop him. He still stabbed the guy that shot him. He didn't care. And so it became a rallying cry to say Geronimo. And then over time, it kind of became more of a joke, you know, this is a bad idea. Well, Geronimo! And then you just do it and you make mistakes. But that's where the term Geronimo comes from. Supposedly, I've also heard some ghost stories that it was actually Geronimo who gave General Crook the name of Grey Wolf. But I don't know if that's true per se. I'm not sure. I've heard that story. I've also heard that General Crook lost his job because of Geronimo. So real quick, supposedly, after his conflicts with Mexico, Geronimo went to war with America. That's where we know Crook most famously from, his conflict with the Apache. Supposedly, Geronimo agreed to surrender, but he did so on the Mexican side of the border with the U.S. So technically the U.S., I guess, you know, I'm out of bounds, you can't touch me. And as the ghost story goes, over a shared bottle of whiskey, Crook, or one of Crook's officers, told Geronimo, even though you've surrendered, the minute you cross back into American territory, they're going to kill you. And so Geronimo, even though he surrendered, he stayed on the Mexican side of the border. And supposedly Crook got in trouble because the U.S. government wanted him. They wanted Geronimo, and they blamed Crook because, hey, he didn't step back across the line. We can't grab him when he's in Mexico. And supposedly Crook actually got demoted. But it's fine because even still, after that, Crook commanded incredible respect. There's military bases and streets and statues of him all across the country. And he actually ended up becoming an advocate for Native people. Famously, he actually testified in the Supreme Court case. Did I write this one down? I believe it was Standing Bear versus Crook, which is funny because he was named in it, and then he testified on behalf of Standing Bear before the Supreme Court justice over a legal dispute. Basically, that was where they settled the argument about, are Native Americans considered U.S. citizens? And the answer was the Supreme Court did rule, yes, they do. And so that's partially contributed to Crook's assistance. But yeah, So, but that's Geronimo and how he ties into Crook. It's kind of funny how all these people tie to each other, you know? Crook and Crazy Horse and Calamity Jane. It was a wild time to be alive. Everybody knew everybody and everybody shot at everybody. If it wasn't for my terrible fear of bullets, it sounded like fun. Well, then again, for the record, I'm afraid of bullets going into me. I don't mind so much if it goes into you. Anyway, though, everyone behaving themselves. Quick question: has anyone actually ever shouted in chat? Help me out here, real quick. Have you ever shouted Geronimo before you did something? Yeah, Civil War, 1861, 1860. Really, the American Civil War was only 4 years? It's so weird that the time frame lives in such infamy. You would honestly expect it to be long. Like the Korean War was also only 4 years, wasn't it? 3 years. It was even less. Connie, yes, yeah, you have shouted Geronimo. I think I have. In fact, yes, I did. I remember I shouted Geronimo once in elementary school. I jumped off of a jungle gym and ended up accidentally drop kicking another kid in the face. Yeah, I'll give you that, Sean. I wouldn't want the dysentery that was running rampant throughout the Wild West ages. What a shitty way to die. Yeah, I said it. I said it. You can all hate me. When we were little, that's what you did. A boomer move. Yeah, it's a very boomer move. That's an odd way to say that's cool, Sean. Just saying. Just saying. You know, weird way to go around the bush, but whatever. Not my fault. Your generation sucks. Anyway, so let's get on to the last one, my personal favorite. And I want to talk about this guy. Not so much his military career, although we could be here all day talking about that. And people have mentioned him in the chat. Sitting Bull. Now, I'm told that his name was pronounced Tatanka. I think that's how you pronounced it, Tatanka. But I'm not 100% sure. He was born in 1831. And technically his name actually translated to Buffalo Who Sits Down. But he went by Sitting Bull. He supposedly, from a very young age, 14 years old was the first time he went into battle. But he kind of gained most notoriety from what was called the Red Cloud War, which ended with the Treaty of Fort Laramie. I think, is that pronounced Laramie? I think so. The Treaty of Laramie, which is where the controversy with Red Cloud starts. Because that was where Red Cloud surrendered, and I've heard people say that he saved a lot of lives and he prevented war, and I agree with you on that. I've also heard some people say he sold out, his culture. I think that's being a bit harsh. But either way, that was where Sitting Bull first gained notoriety, was fighting alongside Red Cloud. He also was the one who had the vision that said, the native people need to fight the U.S. here at Little Bighorn, which was apparently a very bleak, horrifying vision. Supposedly he described it as he saw thousands of soldiers just dropping dead, and he took it as a warning that there'd be a lot of soldiers who would die. And yeah, I'm just gonna say this right now. You notice that people always talk about spirit visions and spirit quests and stuff like that. And I talked to a wolf. He told me I had to follow the moon or something. No. You read these things about Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull and Little Wolf and all stuff, and it's like people dying, death, destruction, ruin. It's like, What the freak? This is not quaint or cute or safe at all. It's cool, but it's not pleasant. That's something that has always kind of annoyed me. I feel like people they soften the native people. You see it a lot with Mexico too. The old Mexican Empire. People always talk about it, in such pleasantries, and well, they were a beautiful culture with arts and sciences. It's like, bull pucky. They were proud, vicious warriors, and they deserve to be respected as such. I've been told I'm a war hawk. I'm too pro-military. It's like, no. The native people like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, they were not sitting around weaving baskets waiting for some big, mean, scary, salivating European to come along and dominate them. Okay? They were proud people with their own cultures, with their own wars, with their own histories, and their own heroes. And that's what should be remembered. Sorry, I kind of got off track there. Anyway, Sean's out of groove. Normally by this point he would have the show completely disrailed. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting disrailed. Back to my point. Sitting Bull was known for his visions, and I don't know if he was a medicine man or a general chief. He wasn't a war chief, I know that. Someone in the chat was earlier saying a minute ago. Where was it? I want to say that Mr. Bishop mentioned it. Yeah, Red Cloud's a war chief. Sitting Bull was a medicine... Okay, so yeah, he was a medicine man. He was kind of like a wise man or a doctor. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Anyway, though. And like I said, he was known for dozens of battles, many wars. I'm kind of surprised, actually, when I was looking it up. I didn't find much information about him and Crook locking up horns. But I guess Crook was busy with Crazy Horse. I mean, you can't be everywhere. But anyway, the thing I really wanted to talk about more with Sitting Bull, and the reason that he's become my favorite, was his post-military career. In 1881, there was a really bad famine. And basically, he claimed he had this vision. And the way he worded it was that the world where white and red fought was ending. There was going to be a new world. A world of the continent. Where it wasn't if you were U.S., or you were Native, or you were Apache, or you were Lakota, or you were Sus, or you were Blackfoot, you would be of this land. Period. And that was his whole thing. His whole life became this new world, this new way. And he famously said the words, he wanted his sons to be raised and taught in this new way of a new world. And his new career didn't get off to a good start, though. After his surrender, he was actually arrested and imprisoned in Fort Randall for like 20 months, over a year. Over a year and a half now that I think about it, actually. Yeah, 20 months, that'd be more than a year and a half. And he was imprisoned there along with 180 other people who had surrendered alongside him. Eventually, in 1883, he was released, and he moved to what is today the Standing Rock Reservation, which, by the way, is where he ended up having his tomb was put. But he would live there permanently, and it wasn't until a year after that, in 1884, he actually got permission from the U.S. federal government to start doing tours. And he had this show called the Sitting Bull Connection. And it was kind of a mixed bag of things, they'd have Wild West shows and stuff, yeah, whatever. But the big thing is he would kind of actually preach. He would preach this vision that he had of of people being united not by where they were from, but where they were. It didn't matter if you were descended from Europeans. It was, this is the land you're in. This is your home. And so is it also the home of these other people. You all have the same home. What does that make you? Who lives in your home? Your family. And that was what he preached. He preached of the North American continent being your home. And it was not a popular opinion at first. Shocking revelation, but in 1884, no, people still were very sore about the what they called the Indian Wars, which is funny because it didn't involve India, but that's beside the point. Great job, Christopher Columbus. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. Now, supposedly, it was during this tour, the Sitting Bull Connection tour, which also went into Canada, by the way, I found out, that he met Annie Oakley. Apparently, Annie Oakley was doing another show at a convention center that he was speaking at. And it's really weird, but supposedly he actually watched her show and was really impressed with her marksmanship. For the uninitiated, Annie Oakley was another sharpshooter, similar to Calamity Jane. And in fact, I've actually seen a lot of people get them mixed up. But Annie Oakley was the one, if I'm not mistaken, she would dual-wield pistols and she could shoot trading cards out of the air, I think. Calamity was the one that would shoot a cigarette out of people's mouths. Still would not try. I don't think I know anyone that I would trust to actually shoot a cigarette out of my mouth. Not like out of disrespect. It's like, I just don't think I know anyone that's good with a gun. And I mean, it sounds cool and it looks cool, but if you mess up, you can get the crazy horse treatment or worse. But supposedly he saw her and was like, I want to meet her. I want to talk to that lady. She's really cool. And I swear this is true. At least as I saw it, as I read it, he actually did get a meeting with her. And it's weird because when they met, according to everyone who saw it, they talked as if they had known each other for years. They actually teased each other like they were old friends. Annie Oakley supposedly commented that Sitting Bull would be a great pet. And everyone's like, holy shit, she just insulted Sitting Bull. This is not going to go well. He laughed and told everyone to calm down. Quote, she's just jealous of my penis. I don't know. Supposedly this was the first time they met, but immediately they were just joking and palling around with each other as if they'd known each other for decades. And they became very good friends. Annie Oakley introduced Sitting Bull to Buffalo Bill, and the three of them all appeared on each other's shows quite routinely, actually. Which, by the way, that's a friendship right there. When you first meet someone and you insult them and then they insult you back, that's how you know it's going to be a good time. And there were, of course, there were slanderous rumors, that they were doing things and stuff. No, there's no proof that he ever did anything inappropriate with Annie Oakley. There's no proof that she did anything. In fact, there's contradictory evidence because in 1885, he actually adopted Annie Oakley. She was an orphan. She was a grown woman when they met, but she was still technically an orphan. He adopted her and gave her an Indian name, Little Sure Shot, which she then carried on and actually used for many more years in her show. So no. Sitting Bull never had a fling or did anything inappropriate with his daughter, Little Sure Shot. But yeah, and they did shows with Buffalo Bill. I want to say for like 5 years. He retired in 1890, and he went back to Standing Rock. Now, like I said, he had done lots of tours. He was mostly known for doing like horse riding tricks in the show, and of course, he would give speeches about his vision of a continent of all people and so forth, and all the people of the continent. That was his big thing. All the people of the continent. But he retired, and unfortunately, he picked a really bad time too, because there was civil unrest. A movement known as the Ghost Dance was going across America. This was a protest by Native American people relating to mistreatment and mismanagement of reservations by the federal government. Imagine that, right? And supposedly there was a lot of conflict because Sitting Bull returned, and even though he wasn't actually the chief or administrator of Standing Rock, he was kind of seen as it because he was so famous and so old and so respected. And he said, let the protesters come to the reservation. Now, I want to point out, he said they could come to the reservation. There were protests at Standing Rock. He himself did not participate. That's another area people talk about Sitting Bull. He did not participate in the Ghost Dance. He just allowed it on the reservation, which is funny because he didn't have the authority to make the decision anyway. But basically, this caused a lot of problems because, again, these were bad. A lot of these ghost dances ended up in riots and things like that. And so one official who oversaw Standing Rock, I got him here, James McLaughlins, I think is how you pronounce his name. Yeah, McLaughlins. He was afraid, I'm not joking, John McLaughlins. What a stupid name. But we can top it, actually. Just wait till you hear this next guy coming up. John McLaughlins was afraid that Sitting Bull was going to take part in the protests, and James thought if Sitting Bull joins, it's going to go bad. Because everybody loves Sitting Bull. Americans, natives, Canadians, Mexicans, everybody loved Sitting Bull, and everyone loved his message and his attitude. He was a civil rights leader, even after his military career. So, James ordered Sitting Bull to be arrested. Now, he specifically handpicked the team of officers that were going to go make the arrest and told them, do it before dawn and put him in some kind of cop car where they can't see him. I don't want people to see you arrest Sitting Bull. If they see you arrest him, there's going to be a riot. And so he trusted his right-hand man, Lieutenant Henry Bullhead. I'm not joking. Lieutenant Henry Bullhead, to oversee this. And he gave the specific instructions, no witnesses. Do it at night before dawn. Put him in a cop car. And what do you think Bullhead did? Do you think he was smart and put Sitting Bull into a unmarked cop car so he could go away? Let me look in the chat real quick. How's the chaos going? Still It's like burgers at McDonald's. Okay, I'll put you out of your suspenseful misery. Henry Bullhead decided to completely break every order that James McLaughlin gave him. Because Bullhead figured, no. See, these people are protesting and stuff because they have heroes like Sitting Bull. Well, how do you stop a hero? You can't kill him. That makes him a martyr. So let me pose the question to you, chat. How do you kill a hero? How do you kill a hero that everyone respects? Every Star Wars fan is going to have the right answer. I guarantee it. I'm going to give a second for people to actually answer. Come on, I want someone to answer. How is the stream going? You can't because they're immortal. Okay. Cute, Tara, but no. With kindness. No. I'll put you out of your misery. But Tara, you get points for trying. You humiliate them. You make people see that they're mortal. That's how you kill a hero. And that was what Bullhead planned to do. Yep, there you go. Check, got it. Kill their respect. Humiliate them. Drag them in the mud. So Bullhead waited until well after 6 a.m., forced his way into Sitting Bull's home, and forced him and his wife, by the way, outside, and told him, you're being arrested. You're going to a jailhouse. And then he told Sitting Bull to get on a horse. He was going to lead Sitting Bull into jail on a horse just after dawn with sunlight and everything, so everyone could see that the great, wise, respected Sitting Bull at the end of the day was just a miserable old man with handcuffs on, being trotted down the street like a trophy. There's just one problem with that. You don't fight through about a dozen different wars and then devote yourself to showmanship and appearing on stage and tour this great country just to be made into a laughingstock by some jagoff named Bullhead. Sitting Bull fought back and resisted. Unfortunately, one of Bullhead's assistants, he had like 12 cops with him, struck Sitting Bull in the back of the head with a baton. Now, seeing Sitting Bull get struck, a civilian that was standing by, I believe his name, did I write his name down? His name was important because he actually had to testify. I believe his name was Catches Bears. He saw this and thought that they were trying to lynch Sitting Bull. So he pulled out a gun and he fired. And he actually caught, and this is going to get complicated, so take notes, children. Catching Bears shot Bullhead in the ribs. Now, apparently, Bullhead realized he was shot, and he grabbed his pistol, but it malfunctioned, and it went off pointing at Sitting Bull, so Sitting Bull got shot in the stomach. Now, all hell has broken loose because everyone's shooting at everyone now. And apparently one of the officers that was with Bullhead, and there's a few different stories. In one version, the officer tried to use Sitting Bull as a human shield, but in others, the dumb cop just pulled his gun out and he ended up shooting Sitting Bull in the back of the head. I've also heard stories that his wife was hurt in this, but she didn't die. She survived. And the one thing that James McLaughlin didn't want to happen, happened. There was a riot. Everything broke into chaos. Officer Durr! We may have found the original Officer Durr. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say it. Oh, my gun malfunctioned while I was pulling it out, and I shot this guy that was standing next to me in the stomach. Uh-huh. Sure thing, buddy. Sure thing. Call him catfish for sure. Anyway, though, in the end, several people were injured. I want to say like 7 officers, including Bullhead, by the way, died. I don't think any natives did. They survived. There were tons of injured. There were like dozens and dozens of wounded and injured. But tragically, in the end, Sitting Bull died from his wounds. It's very sad because all this happened just after 6 a.m., just after sunrise. But when the coroners actually looked at Sitting Bull's body, they discovered that he actually had died slowly. The bullets that entered his stomach and even his head missed his vitals, and he actually bled out. He laid there and died while there's a riot going on all around him. But after that, his body actually was toured. He ended up being buried and exhumed and reburied in a bunch of different places. It wasn't until, I want to say, like, well into the 1900s, he finally got his final burial and he was put back in Standing Rock. And if I'm not mistaken, that's where he is today. You can go see his tomb today at Standing Rock, which would be really cool. Personally, he's my favorite. Not because of the war stuff. I mean, that's cool too, but I actually really like his mentality. Before I go into the finales of it all, before I go into my final little speech here, because we're getting close to the end. Real quick, in the 1900s, this journalist, James Lazarus, of all things, yeah, that was his pen name, James Lazarus. He tried to do a smear campaign against Sitting Bull, claiming that at the Buffalo Bill shows he would curse the audience in Lakota. There's a couple problems with it, though. One, he wasn't Lakota, he was Sus. Or Sioux. He was Sioux. Excuse me, he was Sioux. Oh, sue me. Okay? He was Sioux, he wasn't Lakota. He cooperated with the Lakota. So he wouldn't be, even if he was cursing people, he wouldn't be cursing them in Lakotan, or the Lakota language. Secondly, his entire life philosophy was based around tearing down racial divides. So no, he's not going to sit here and curse white people because he was so racist and so bigoted. But the big one, the thing that made me actually laugh when I was reading this, our buddy James couldn't get his years right. He claimed that it was in 1884 at the Buffalo Bill shows that Sitting Bull would curse the crowd. But quick, everybody in the chat, do you see the problem with that logic? The Buffalo Bill shows were in 1885. 84 was when he was preaching his campaign. So, yeah, James Lazarus wanted to be the man to topple Sitting Bull's career, and he couldn't even bother to get the dates right for the shows where he supposedly was cursing people, which isn't true. There's nothing proving that. First of all, he didn't speak the Lakota language. He spoke Sioux. Two, he wasn't doing the Buffalo Bill shows in 84. And three, his entire thing, his whole motif, his whole campaign was based around the destruction of racial differences. You know, and I'm going to kind of go on a little speech here real quick. Because yesterday was Independence Day. Yesterday was the day, historically, when Americans became a thing. And, you know, I kind of mentioned it last week. I'm just sick and tired of having to apologize for this stuff. I'm sick and tired of people acting like it's something you should apologize for to be American. I'll give you, we're not a perfect country. I believe it was Barack Obama who actually said, America was a country built on lofty ideals. Ideals so lofty, we ourselves fall short of them sometimes. And that's true. That's completely true. But a thing that a lot of people don't take into consideration is America and really us, we were an experiment. We still are an experiment. Uh, I mean, everyone talks about the free market and the free world and stuff. The truth of the matter is, democracy, republics, we're a minority in world governments. Most countries aren't operated like us, for better or worse. And while, yeah, it sure as hell took us a lot of missteps, and we we had a lot of learning to do. And we could talk about, all kinds of horrible things. We can talk about slave plantations. We can talk about, the race wars, Or we could choose to talk about other things. We could choose to talk about Sitting Bull and Martin Luther King. One of the things that Sitting Bull always said was the true tragedy of life is people don't realize how much they have in common. The fact of the matter is, Native, Federal, Mexican, Canadian, there's more that makes us the same than different. And that's one of the reasons that I can't stand social media, And I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to go there. Here comes the old man talking about social media. Yep, here we go. It profoundly confuses me that you have people like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull who spent decades, think about it, decades at war with white people. And they still were able to look at these people and make peace. Crazy Horse's people were dying from plague. What was his solution? Go to the man he'd been fighting a war with. And look at the average Facebook user. Look at the average Twitter user. We can't read 2 sentences from someone without deciding, oh, damn liberal, hateful conservative. It's like, what happened? When did we accept this standard of dehumanizing each other over the most tiny little differences? One thing you disagree on, and suddenly they're a demon, And it's like, what the bloody hell? That's not American. That's not America. That's something to think about, Because let's be honest here, we still have fireworks. We're still going to be setting stuff off all month long. People think July 4th is a holiday. No. It's a season. So, yeah. Think about it. That's what I want you to do. That's what I want you to take away from these last 2 episodes. Look at yourself on social media. Look at yourself and how you act. And ask yourself, are you more like Casey Jones? Or are you more like Officer Bullhead? You know what I mean? Which side of the coin are you on? Because it is a choice. And it's one that I think we all need to start making better. But what do I know, right? I'm some dude sitting in a oversized chair in the middle of a desert with a pair of dead dogs hanging out. But in any case, whether I'm a senile old fool rambling on to get off my damn lawn or what, we'll be back next week. We're going to get straight biblical on your butts. A topic I've really been wanting to talk about for a while. We're going to talk about the dark side of the Bible. We're going to talk about the demons and angels and monsters of the biblical account. Because a couple weeks ago we talked about paranormal angels and demons, and everyone's like, well, you should talk about the actual legends and stories. And joke's on you, I'm into that stuff. So yeah, we're going to go biblical next week, talking about lesser known creatures and characters from the Abrahamic accounts. And I can't wait to see you all there. I hope you all had a great 4th of July. I hope you all have a great summer continuing. Yes, says the atheist with a Christian sister. Yes, I do. Anglican parents. Yes, this is actually a chair. I think it's a love seat, technically. I don't care. Anyway, though, my name is Kristoff N. Chester. These are my companions, Famine and Gluttony. We got the bishop over there in the corner. Now they... oh, God damn it! I literally was about to say, I didn't get attacked this week. Teach me to open my... yeah, there you are, you little bastard. Go play with those goats over there. Oh, that was a mistake. Anyway, as always, we'll be back next week. And until then, this is Kristoff N. Chester saying, keep checking the shadows, and God